So it's not a once-off solution, is it? It has to be repeated.
It has to be repeated because the PFAS, and I don't know whether it's come out in your inquiry so far, but the PFAS will settle in the sediment on the base of a riverbed, a lake, a creek, in the sediment that builds up in stormwater outlets. And so as the water passes through, either the water has contaminants already. You never find PFAS in isolation. It's always mixed waste, right? So any water sample will be mixed waste. It's very easy when you're taking water samples to simply put your finger in the water and say, that's what's in that water and that's it. When really what you should be doing is trying to get a longer analysis of the water. So the sponge in its diagnostic form is capable of doing that. The water will continue to pass through. We know from the research that we've done, and I should just say too that whilst I don't have any scientific qualifications, our Chief Research Officer is a gentleman by the name of Professor Dr. Richard Bernardi, who was a distinguished fellow of the ANSTO, the Australian Nuclear Technology and Science Organisation. He's the gentleman who identified the qualities of the gyroid sponge, being the fact that it's a gyroid structure which has some physical properties, some chemical properties, and then what he's scientifically called some indeterminate or undescribable properties, because it does things that we didn't think it could do. And PFAS retention is one of them. And so from our perspective, the remediation can be done in the water. So as water passes through, the sponge is capable of taking the PFAS out, and up to over 90% of the PFAS can be removed from the water in a single pass. So if we were to set up in cereal the way that granular activated carbon is used, we believe that our solution not only cheaper, easier to deploy, and then easier to maintain and keep going, because of the end of life cycle of our product, the way that we designed it, it takes the PFAS out of the environment. And I think, Kate, I don't know if you have recognised my name as the person who helped set up the Organ and Tissue Friends of Parliament for New South Wales. I'm a liver transplant recipient and I'm immune compromised. So I'm very particular about what I do with my time and how I do things. I'd actually retired onto the Central Coast. And when I saw PFAS in the water, that raised alarm bells. So for the last 2.5 years, I've spent a considerable amount of time trying to understand this challenge. The reality is when it comes to the range of chemicals, we can look at taking it out of the water. We can deploy trench-based soil remediation. So as groundwater rises up through the soil, that will flush the PFAS out. PFAS is not the sort of chemical that just sits there and waits for something to happen. In December of 2024, just a couple of months ago, I went to the Christie's Beach or Christie's Hill Metropolitan Fire Service Station, which was a contaminated site. And I was expecting, although I'd grown up in Adelaide, to go and see a fire station on the top of a hill, isolated. Right next door, and it was on the high side of a mound, it wasn't a hill in Adelaide, it's probably very flat, there was a Telstra building and then 16 flats on the same residential block. So that fire station, and I'd spoken to the senior fire officer who was involved, never used fire retardant chemicals on that site. So the PFAS that's on that site, they've been blamed for, but he tells me that it's not from them. There's a lot of industry around there, so the PFAS chemicals, as we've found, are proliferating through. And so fire retardant chemicals are the easy target, right? So if you see a fire, the fire, it's over there, that's where the fire, but who started it, where did it come from? So the reality is, PFAS, yes, it is out there, but it can be remediated one waterway at a time without the complex nature of the granular activated carbon, because one of the challenges you have with GAC is that once you've contaminated it, you have to then either incinerate it or bury it. So we either burn it or bury it. When you burn it, you create other toxins. When you bury it, you create a problem for later on. But if you use the titanium dioxide decomposition, we can break it down.
And is your technology at